So I think we'll get started. So yeah, thank you very much for attending. So this is the UKRI Future Leaders Fellowship webinar for business and non-academic applicants for round 8. So by non-academic, we mean those from the public sector, charities, non-IRO registered Catapults, and the UK Agri-tech centres. Yeah, thank you very much for joining. So we've got a fantastic panel today. So just to introduce myself, I'm Callum Day, Senior Programme Manager for Business, Innovation and Evaluation from the UKRI Future Leader Fellowship team, which I think we'll just shorten to FLF for the remainder of this presentation because it's quite a mouthful otherwise. We've also got Cherish Vines, Programme Coordinator for Fellowship and Talent Programmes from Innovate UK. We've also got from Innovate UK, Dr. Jennifer Pottles, Lead Specialist for Innovation Talent. And we're very lucky to have Dr. Sara Shinton, Director of the FLF Development Network, who's very well versed in the FLF scheme, and has also participates quite often as a rover, so has got quite a few hints and tips from her side on what makes a good application. So yeah, thank you very much for coming along, and I'll just run over what we're looking at talking about today. So this is the agenda, what we'll run through. So we're going to go over a quick recap of the FLF scheme, a few of the changes for round 8, some hints and tips on how to write a high quality application, including some hints from previous applicants. And then we're going to run over sort of how to submit a full application for round 8 and how to respond to reviewers. Before we'll dive into the FLF Development Network and all the good work that they do. And at the end, we'll have some time for some live Q&As. So you should have a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So if you've got any questions, anything that pops to mind, please do pop them in there and we'll answer as many as we can towards the end of this session. Any that we don't get around to answering, we'll follow up in an email along with the slides and the recording. So let's jump in. So the Future Leaders Fellowship Programme supports successful careers at the forefront of research and innovation by investing in next generation of world-class leaders within UK universities, organisations and businesses. This is a first-of-a-kind scheme that supports applicants from across all of UKRI's remit to encourage multidisciplinary thinking. And FLF has run for 6 full rounds, and we're currently in the process of assessing round 7. So round 1 and 2 saw only academic fellows awarded. And then from round 3 onwards, we started to see an increase in non-academic fellows be awarded. So in round 3, there were 5, round 4, there were 11, round 5, 12, and round 6, 13. And we're seeing quite a considerable few for round 7. So in total, it makes us 12% of the population of the total FLF fellows, and it's gradually increasing with each round. So we'd love to see that pattern continue. The main thing to get from this award is this is not a standard project grant. It's not just a normal grant in any means. It's a unique funding opportunity made up of 3 pillars: the individual, the innovation and the research, and the host organisation. And we're going to talk about a bit more of these. So for the FLF programme, applicants can apply for funding over 4 years with a +3 extension to fund ambitious innovation or research. And there is no maximum or minimum award value, giving applicants ultimate flexibility to cost their proposal appropriate to the task that they want to undertake. The scheme funds the salaries of the fellow and the team that they build around them. And work can be completed as a single project or portfolio of smaller related projects. And the FLF scheme encourages applicants from a vast variety of backgrounds, and to kind of make this as available to as many people as possible, we offer flexible, part-time and reduced hours fellowships, as well as job share options to applicants. So the focus today is on the first 3 stages of the application process. So the written part mostly. So first you have to submit your full application, which is then independently and externally reviewed. And then you'll have an opportunity to look at the comments from those reviews and respond to those. And then we submit the kind of reviews and your response to a shortlisting meeting. And then if you're successful in the shortlisting meeting, we'll invite you to an interview. And if you're invited to an interview, we'll kind of target more support for you at that point as well. And yeah, keep posted for that if you're lucky to get through to that stage. So there's been some key changes for round 8 that we kind of wanted to highlight here. The kind of biggest change so far is the expanded eligibility. So round 8 has kind of quite considerably increased the eligibility for non-academic applications to include incorporated businesses, industries and enterprises. Charitable organisations are registered for the first time. Catapults and public bodies are not registered as IROs with UKRI and the UK Agri-tech centres. Additionally, please read thoroughly the round 8 guidance for some of the changes that have taken place as a result of the subsidy control streamline scheme that the scheme is being funded under. Yeah, make sure to read this very carefully because this is going to dictate various different funding allowances for your awards. So make sure to look into that because it has shifted slightly since previous rounds. Additionally, in relation to this and the subsidy control rules, we are going to require a statement on trade between Northern Ireland and the European Union and whether or not your project affects this. So yeah, again, read the round 8 guidance for some more information on this. And we've also streamlined the application system. So in previous rounds, there's been an outline stage before full application, and this has been removed. So the full application is what you need to submit now, and that will be the 4th of July, 4 p.m. GMT. So let's have a look at how to write a high quality application. So you've got to make sure that your future leader fellowship scheme is right for you, and you've got to ask yourself these questions. So do I have evidence of success in my career? And evidence of success doesn't necessarily mean kind of patents or publications. You can demonstrate success in a vast variety of ways. Could it be a development of a new product or a process or a new methodology? Are you creating and innovating? Can you demonstrate innovation already that you've achieved and any plans for the future? You don't necessarily need to have had prior grant funding to receive a Future Leader Fellowship. Is your idea groundbreaking? The scheme is 4 years plus an option to extend for a further 3. So it's got to be quite an ambitious, big, justified program for that level of funding and time. Are you developing new approaches that will create change? Not just kind of within your own business, but will there be any kind of economic, societal or environmental impacts as a result of your fellowship? And will you take your team with you on your journey to success? Being a future leader is all about building a team around you and taking them on the journey. Their career development and their needs need to be considered. The quality, diversity and inclusion and healthy working culture all need to be factored into this. So this is a quick quote from one of the successful fellows, Rachel Carey from Zinc Ventures. And I won't read it out entirely, but I think it's a really good example from a business fellow that shows where they brought together the 3 pillars that make this fellowship. Their kind of individual professional growth, the support from the host organisation, as well as the research and innovation project. And as Rachel said, this fellowship has allowed her to do work that she otherwise wouldn't be able to have done kind of in a normal working practice. So as a future leader, you have a unique voice and you need to develop this, and it has to be really evident in your application. The host organisation can, of course, oversee and advise on this. You need to consider an evidence in the application why you are the most appropriate person to carry out the project. Highlight your unique positive impacts. What will happen from you leading, and reflect on the strongest competencies and personal leadership style that will set you apart from others in your field. And consider the integrity of the research that you are undertaking and the various toolkits available from UKRI to help you with that. Future leaders also broaden their horizon, and the FLF scheme is a fantastic way to expand your network and look to form collaborations to help deliver your project. So you could reach out to new organizations and people who may benefit from your work, and it could help to reach new markets or offer a fresh perspective on the value of your research. And then you need to kind of evidence this proactiveness in your application. Future leaders solve ambitious problems and make an impact. Kind of ask yourself, why can't the work I'm proposing be achieved through other routes or project grants, and really make this specific to the Future Leader Fellowship? Outside of business as usual activities, potentially with enhanced risks, and detail how you'll mitigate these risks. Think about the impacts beyond the benefits to your organization and the global impact, as well as the impact upon kind of sustaining research and innovation talent in the UK. Future leaders can present the vision and the detail. So you should be able to showcase your vision by building a narrative and tie everything together within the application, and make sure clear deliverables are included for the initial 4 years, and that robust plans and detailed work packages are in place to achieve these deliverables. These need to back up your vision and evidence that it's realistic. Acknowledge that there will be rewards and there will be risks, and consider how you'll mitigate those. And consider different perspectives and dimensions, the impact, the limitations, project risks, innovation, and take this into consideration for kind of today's market or climate and the barriers that you might have to overcome. And build confidence in your ability as a Future Leader Fellow to deliver from the very start. So have you been involved in any early projects or studies or market research to back up the research that you're proposing? That's a quick overview, some of the hints and tips that we've gathered from previous fellows. And I will hand over to Cherish to run through how to apply.
Brilliant. Thank you, Callum. So I'm going to go through some details, some of the mandatory and optional documents, and how to kind of submit these via the JES system, which is what the Future Leaders Fellowships team currently have applicants apply through. So in order to submit your full application, you will need to complete the application form on the JES system, and they will detail any mandatory and optional attachments. We do say that the information input into the attachments is integral into putting together a strong application. Next slide, please. So this is kind of just an overview of the attachments. These are mandatory ones. Again, this is all available on the website, and it should detail if any templates are required and the maximum length that you're allowed to input each document as. Next slide, please. So first of all, we'll go through the case for support, which is the largest document the scheme asks you to submit. It's 8 pages. This is a freehand document, so you're not governed by any kind of specifics, but we do advise that you obviously input detail and information on your project that correlate with the assessment criteria. So on the web page, this is a separate document under the additional info tab, and this goes through in a bit more detail, but I will briefly go over these today, the 4 assessment criteria that not only the independent reviewers, but the shortlisting panel members will see and assess your application against. Next slide, please. So there's certain things obviously within the criteria that we'd ask you to look at and include in your case for support. So your research and innovation excellence. So we're looking for an ambitious plan to demonstrate innovation and take into consideration the risk mitigation and feasibility of the project. We're looking for a current awareness of research and innovation and why the proposed project will have a bigger impact kind of for your own business and wider, as Callum said earlier. We'd like you to make references, if applicable, quoting key statistics that might strengthen your application. And when we're looking for impact and strategic relevance to be executed in the application, we're looking for the benefits that go beyond the business kind of sector, industry and UK-wide. We'd also ask that you look at the relevance to UKRI and IUK and take into account the 7 technology families that are launched in the strategy. And these can all be found on the website. Next slide, please. So the next 2 criteria are applicant and development. So when looking for a future leader, we're looking for people to collaborate with others and guide their own team. We're looking for evidence that you can showcase your own potential and that you can take on a project of considerable size and the impact this will have. As Callum kind of detailed a bit earlier on, the scheme is very flexible. You can take reduced hours or part-time working and a job share basis also. We do ask that full justification is obviously required for these requests due to them not following the normal trajectory of an FLF. Reduced hours is normally applicable to people that can show how the reduction in time on the project is crucial to their own personal development. And part-time is normally considered when an applicant needs to continue with their own personal responsibilities alongside the project. Next slide, please. So the research and innovation environment. So we ask for detail on why the host organisation you've chosen is the best place for you to host the project. So some things to consider would be that it's a leading area, excellent supply chain, and we obviously ask that you articulate this as well as possible. So we ask that you have leadership buy-in from senior figures at your host organisation, not simply for the project, but also for the applicant and the team themselves, what they have achieved and what they will achieve. To show that support from the organisation is tangible, so that could include contributions such as monetary contributions, but those non-tangible support also through things like mentoring, which contribute to career development. So we briefly would ask that, if applicable, intellectual property is detailed here as well. So we'd ask that all applicants think about if IP will be generated, but just know that it's not expected. However, if it is generated, how will you give due regard to the protection of any intellectual property? And to note that UKRI will not own any intellectual property. That will depend on any collaboration agreement that the applicant and the host organisation has had prior to this point. Next slide, please. So next we move on to the CV and outputs list. So this is done via a template, which is 3 pages long. We ask that the applicant uses this, any co-investigators and any named individual on the application. We do note that it's laid out in quite a form that would suit an academic. So we do say, given the reduction in the pages, if anything is not applicable to yourself, feel free to remove these sections. Input in this section can also be included if you have a PhD, but it's not mandatory for anyone applying from a business or non-application environment to have one of them. So obviously publications can be included here, but should they not be of a high volume, what you can include is any patents, new products, processes, or trade publications that you feel will strengthen your application here. Next slide, please. So the justification of resources is quite an integral one. Obviously, where this is government money, we ask that everything is fully detailed and justified on the cost, and we ask that you demonstrate the value for money that your project will provide. So this is not a template one, it's a 2-page freehand. there will be, a bit later on, we'll go through the cost categories, and anyone from a business or non-academic background will be asked to submit a finance form, and this will detail all the costs. We do ask that it's just the first 4 years costed as opposed to the 4+3 model, even if that's what you will be aiming for in the future. It would only be the first 4 years that are assessed. We would ask that ahead of submitting the application, you read through the guidance for all eligible costs, as ineligible cost will be removed should anyone be awarded. And for non-independent research organisations, Catapults, Agri-tech centres and public bodies, that a tapered salary may be applicable from year 3, but this will be detailed more within the guidance as well. Next slide, please. So your data management plan follows a template, so it's all laid out what would be required. So this is much dependent on your project and how much generated data you will get from this, and seeing that this will be managed in the most appropriate way. So for this document, you'll need to consider ethical implications, any raw data, human or animal samples, for example, how your project may affect this and how you will mitigate any risks. We do ask, obviously, if data is commercially sensitive, that you explain it within the data management plan, how this data will be protected and why, and at all times adhering to GDPR rules. Next slide, please. So one other of the mandatory documents is what's known as an organisational supporting statement. So this should come from a senior individual from the host business or non-academic organisation. To note that this will often come from the applicant themselves if they are the most senior person in their business, and that is acceptable. So there should be a lot of focus on the individual in this statement and how the organisation will support them to achieve the outcomes of the project, and how they've tailored the support to the applicant to carry this out. For charities in particular, the statement will need to contain detail on how they will not commercially gain from the Future Leaders Fellowship Scheme. And for public bodies, they will need to input declaration on the double counting requirement, which all will be detailed within the guidance in more depth, or we can go into that with you if needed. Next slide, please. So onto the finance form for business applicants. There is 2 separate documents for round A, and one will be solely for businesses, and the other will cover your non-independent research organisations, Catapults, Agri-tech centres and public bodies. This is a template to use. So we advise that you use the current version on the main web page, because this is the most up-to-date one. You will need to save the entire workbook. It is a 12-page document, and upload as a PDF as a letter of support within your JES, when you're submitting, your JES application. It's very important to note that total cost cannot be increased after the application stage, but allowing for movement of funds where the terms and conditions will allow this, but the total project costs cannot be increased after being awarded. So please include everything you think you will need and fully justify these. Next slide, please. So as Callum touched on earlier, obviously subsidy control will be evident for lots of people, or the Northern Ireland Protocol. So within our guidance, we do have subsidy ratios and considerations for how your research will be broken down. So there is examples on these on page 37 and 38 of the guidance. And I would advise just looking into this a bit more to see where your business falls under when costing things within your finance form. Next slide, please. So the work plan is another freehand document, so it's just a one-page document that we ask. So it should just detail diagrammatically how you intend to carry out your project over the 4 or potentially 4+3 years. We don't ask that this follows any specific template, as I've said, just that it's legible and landscape, so it's readable for all. Next slide, please. So we also detail that anyone providing specific support for the applicant and the application in the form of a project partner or a mentor can provide a supporting statement or a letter of support. So by project partners, we mean anyone that might be able to provide an in-kind support or a monetary value, maybe access to facilities, that kind of thing, but will not be receiving costs directly from the fellowship. Mentors can be internal or external, and these are people that provide more of a personal development for the applicant and can kind of guide them in their career trajectory to achieving the project as well. So we would say these should only be permitted for people who have defined roles and are named within the application. And just to show additional validity, we ask that they are signed and dated. The guidance states that should be within 6 months of submitting the application, and all monetary values, if applicable, should be included here. Next slide, please. So a cover letter is required in a few instances, and if you feel none of these apply to you, please don't feel you have to submit one. They should be used if it's a resubmission, so the applicant has submitted a previous application to the FLF scheme. If you will be applying or requesting funding over 1.5 million, and that is of the total project costs for any business or non-academic applicants. If you intend to apply for a fellowship, that is on a reduced hours or a job share or part-time basis. And the last thing we say is if there's specific people or an organisation you wish not to independently review your application, you can to detail this here. Just to note as well that once you come to the end of all your applications and you feel like you've got it fully completed and it's been checked over and you're ready to submit, that once you click to submit your application, this will not be open to be amended and changed ongoing. So say you submit ahead of the deadline, that application then sits in the system for the FLF team to check. And this will only be returned if it meets their return for amendment policy. So please just ensure that they're checked and double checked prior to submission. Next slide, please. So after all of that, all the applications gone through and you've been independently reviewed, you will have the opportunity, should you wish to respond to any reviewer comments. And I think the main points are all there on the screen for you. So when we talk about a positive tone in responding, we're talking about being open to feedback and constructive criticism. So if you can obviously demonstrate that you're willing to take this on board and you can address the reviewer comments and be clear and concise, then this should reflect positively on your proposal when the shortlisting meetings are going ahead. When you're considering your audience, so just think about who will be reading your response. So this will be panel members. Obviously, we can't assume they're all technical experts in the area. They are normally quite generalist, but they will have some idea of the detail within your application. So that's why it's good to kind of narrow down the points you wish to kind of rebut and the criticism you wish to pinpoint. We do ask that all reviewer comments are addressed, be that positive or not. It's obviously nice to just acknowledge that they've taken the time to review. We do say that any new information can be included. So we appreciate, obviously, at the point you apply and gather all the information for your project, there's quite a time between, so things might change. And if you feel like anything could strengthen your application, you are well within your rights to include this within your 3-page response. But with that being said, obviously, as it is only 3 pages, we do say, just to be clear and concise, try to avoid maybe repeating information that's already in the full application. So anything you feel that would add value or addresses reviewers' points, we would say this would be most integral to include in your PI response. Next slide, please. So here we've got the key dates for round 8. So I'm sure most of you will be aware that the round is live, sorry. And this, the deadline for the full applications is the 4th of July at 4 p.m. That is UK time. Just be aware there's sometimes a few loopholes to go through, so it's good to get equipped with the JES system and try as much as possible to not leave it to the last kind of hour, and we don't want anyone worrying about missing that deadline. Just to know, obviously, all these dates are available on the website. Yeah, they're fully published, so if anyone needs to go back and check or feels they won't be able to make certain time-ins, the team are always on hand to kind of look into this. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cherish. So I think we'll now hand over to Dr. Sara Shinton, who is from the FLF Development Network.
Hello.
Sara, take it away.
Great, and thank you all. Thank you for the invitation. Oh, my slides are racing. That's fine. So there we go. So let me tell you a little bit about what the FLF Development Network is. We are a consortium which is right across the UK with 8 partners, one of which is a small medium-sized enterprise, a small technology startup company. And we were awarded this as a commercial contract. So we are not part of UKRI. They are our client, effectively. We've been running the network since 2021. And in short, what we do is, once you are appointed and you've begun your FLF, we provide a range of bespoke support to help you progress on your leadership throughout your fellowship. So this includes a range of things, and I'm just going to give you a few really brief headlines today. But what I'll do when Callum sends you out the slides, I've also written a couple of pages which summarises the FLFDN, because I'm aware that for some of you, there might be things we offer that would strengthen your application, and you can refer to the fact that you're aware that we're going to be there with you and supporting you as you go through your fellowship. So some of the examples that are particularly well taken up are our 360 feedback and coaching program. So this is a specifically designed framework which is around the FLF. So it's about research leadership, it's about innovation leadership, and it's a set of criteria, and we ask you to identify people who can judge your performance and your needs against these criteria, and then you receive that feedback from a coach, and you can get a series of coaching appointments to talk through, and that's very well taken up by our FLFs right across the board, including industry-based ones. We will also provide you with a mentor. Now, I'm aware that many of you will have mentors at the moment, and there was a question earlier about, what support there is with your application development. I really hope that you're calling on any mentors you have already to support you with that, because you should not be writing your fellowship in a bubble. You really need that external perspective from people around you who are supportive of your ambitions, but will provide you with some critical friend feedback. And we sustain that throughout the fellowship through our mentoring program. So an example might be that you have a mentor who is in your research and innovation area, who's an expert in your field, but it might be that we could provide you with a mentor who could help you about a particular legal issue, or somebody who has spun out a product into a particular market. And we have a really extensive network, and if you give us a request, we will go off and squeeze our address books and find you somebody who can provide you with support on a particular topic. Sometimes the topics are about your personal experience, so it may well be that if during the course of your fellowship, you, for example, have to have new caring responsibilities, it might be that we could find you a mentor who's independent of your organisation, but could talk to you about how they balanced those responsibilities alongside their research and innovation responsibilities. So the mentoring is very much about you and your needs. We also obviously have a training and development program, which is lots of online and in-person courses and events. And we also have a research and innovation environment. Now, again, in the document I'm going to send you afterwards, I'll sort of explain these in a bit more detail. But basically, the research and innovation environment strand is a series of activities that bring you together and give you insights into particular things. So in a moment, I'm going to show you some specific examples. But basically, what we do is we talk to our fellows, we listen to what their coaches tell us, obviously in anonymized form. We don't get any individual reports, but we will get feedback from our coaches, which might say the innovation strategies come out from Bayes, and people are really interested in what that means. It might be that people are saying, you know, there's a new funding opportunity that's come up, which is what we've got at the moment with UKRI and interdisciplinary research. And you know, these fellows are really interested to know what that means. What we do under research and innovation then is we'll find experts and we'll run events, often online events, where we'll bring people together. The other things that we do is try to bring our fellows together. So we have online coffee mornings, we have peer-to-peer activities. We also do visits to different places. So we've got a visit to IBM coming up, where fellows can apply to go and spend the day there talking to their research and innovation teams and trying to find common ground and interests. And we are constantly looking for new and interesting things to do that's led by our fellows. The other thing that we offer is an additional funding strand, which on top of the very generous funding that you're going to get if you secure your fellowship, is very specifically about your leadership. So some examples are, we've got a group of fellows in industry at the moment who are looking at how to educate their academic counterparts, because they say a lot of the interactions that they have with people in universities, there's a lack of understanding about the innovation environment within a commercial organisation. And they're actually doing some work to try and help educate universities and other researchers. And we've provided them with the funding to do that. Another thing that we do is provide funding for novel ideas, because we bring our fellows together on something called our Crucible program. And then if they put their heads together and come up with something new and exciting, we'll provide some seed money so that you can begin to explore that idea, maybe have a day writing or visiting each other, maybe a bit of proof of concept data. So we've got additional funding that's very responsive. It's on a smaller scale, and certainly we know we can't pay for very substantial things that are about one person's fellowship or one person's innovation idea. But what we will do is fund things that bring you together and enable you. Callum, could we have the next slide? So in addition to that, as Callum mentioned when he introduced me, I've also been on the other side of this. So since round 3, I've been a rover. And what the roving panel members do is we scrutinise the process. So we are sitting there in the background during the SIF panels that are coming up for you guys in, let me just check that, in next February. And then we are observing the interview process that you will be going through in April. And really there's a group of about 20 of us, and we are there ensuring that the process that you go through is fair. And we really do pay particular attention to you as non-university applicants. We want to be sure that you're given a fair playing field, that as your applications are being considered, that it's within the context that you have grown in as leaders, and that you are the resources that you have available. And the rover has quite a responsible role to make sure that no applicant is unfairly prejudiced by any strange behaviours or opinions that we get in the panels. I will be honest that we have less and less to do every year because the panels are excellent. In the early years of being a roving panel member, there were times when we were seeing things that were, you know, perhaps slightly old-fashioned views of what research leadership was. In the recent rounds that I've observed, the panels take this really serious as well. And there's a real pride in the FLF community about the fact that this is a real leader in terms of research and innovation assessment. So I hope that the experience, if I can say that, will be a pleasurable one for you. I hope that when you get your reviews back to your application, that you can see that the reviewers respect the work that you've put into it. I hope that when you get your comments back from SIF panel, that you see see those same recognitions. And I hope that when you get to interview, that is an experience that's positive for you. And there's a lot of really good practice there. We'll come back and talk about that later once we get to the interview stage, but there's a lot of support at that point and a lot of insight that you'll get. Another thing that I've been doing as a rover is obviously talking to other fellows and other panel members, and alongside the information that Callum will send you from this presentation, I'm going to add in a few blogs and resources that FLFs themselves have written about the process, and so I hope that that's helpful for you in being able to reflect on somebody who's been through the process and come out the other side. And I'm also just really happy to answer any questions that we have later when I've finished about the process from my perspective. I don't work for UKRI. I am an independent panel member, so I will be giving you that perspective about what it's like to be a member of your research and innovation community who's been asked to be a part of this process. But obviously I'm here principally to talk about the Future Leader Fellows Development Network. So Callum, can I have the next slide? So what I did in preparation for this is I went through and reviewed what our industrial and what I've called our public fellows, so basically people who are not in universities, where they're finding value. And these were the common themes that came up again and again. They really enjoyed being able just to get together with other fellows who were also not in academic environments, but also with researchers who were, because you've got multiple identities as a researcher. You've got your disciplinary or your issue or your subject area identity. You've got your identity as an industrial or a charity-based or a small company fellow, and you've got other identities about the journey that you've taken to get here, which might be about the different organisations that you've been part of, the different countries that you've worked in. And so there's lots and lots of dimensions to this. And because the FLF community is now at over 500, we can probably find you a group of people who will share those characteristics with you. So we find that those are very popular with our fellows. The other thing that we find is that all the one-to-one support goes down really well. Obviously, for some of you, you are in very small organisations where it's, it may only be you. And so the ability to be able to tap into a supportive network is really appealing. And so we find that people often use the coaches that they work with and the mentors that we find them to become a personal board of directors. A commercial organisation or a public organisation has a board of directors, but this is a group of people who are looking at you and your leadership, and certainly we really enjoy the process of finding interesting and positively challenging mentors to work with you and to support you. In terms of the training that we offer, we find that very specific training about research projects and research teams is also very popular. And again, if you're in an organisation and as a researcher, you're in a minority, you may find that your local training is more generally about project management or team management. And what we'll do is support, but we have things that are very specifically about developing, supporting researchers, running research projects, and particularly research projects that are deliberately ambitious and very innovative, and i.e. there are lots of unknowns and there are lots of things that can go wrong. So the offer is very tailored to that. So even researchers and fellows who've had project management training, they often come back to it in order to get that research perspective on it. And another thing that's been really interesting has been the number of topics that link to personal impact and personal confidence. When you get an FLF, you will be feted by your organization and everybody else. Everyone will go, it's amazing, you're this leader, it's, you're going to change the world. And what we found is that a lot of our fellows have major voices of doubt in their heads. They have real imposter syndrome, because at that point they think, I'm just the same person I was yesterday. I've got this amazing award. And what we try to do is to equip them with confidence. So we will run sessions on things like negotiation, emotional intelligence, their personal resilience, but also insights into their personal leadership style through some of our psychometrics. And we also run a leadership retreat, which is popular with our industry fellows. So we look at you as a whole person. There are no judgments. We don't report back to UKRI about the training that you come on. You are never identified. So if there is something that you need, we are here to support you, and in I hope a very open-minded way. So Callum, the next one, please. So I've mentioned some of these, but I just wanted to give you some actual specific things rather than general things. As I said, the research project management is popular, also partly because you can do that at your own pace. We're conscious of the fact that for some fellows, it's very difficult to commit to things because you're in fast-moving environments. Some of you will carry a lot of responsibilities, and there are times when you're going to have to surrender a place on a course because an emergency has cropped up in your organisation. So we do offer some flexible learning online that you do at your own pace, and then we supplement that with one-to-ones, and you can spend time with a tutor. Another thing that we found people are enjoying are our Insights into Policy series. So this is where you meet particular policymakers. So as I said, there's another example there that we ran a session with Bays from UK government on the innovation strategy, so that you could actually meet the policymakers and talk to them, not just about what the innovation strategy covered, but also give your perspectives. And we actually only this week finished a policy run of activities, which we did in Edinburgh, Cardiff, Belfast, London, and Salford, where we were looking at the regional and national assemblies, we were looking at local governments, and really trying to understand how innovators and researchers can influence policy making and can build awareness in policymakers about the particular needs of research and innovation. And again, I suspect that most of you will not be remotely surprised to see that one of our most popular courses is about setting priorities and managing time. Everybody needs help with this. And again, this is a popular one. And we are very open to running these courses specifically for industrial fellows if we have a big enough audience for them. So really, you work with us to design it. You get a one-to-one with one of our managers who will listen to the things that are challenges for you, and then we'll point you to things that we have already in existence in our program, and if there isn't anything that fits, we'll go out and design something. So so really I hope that we can grow with you during your FLF, and the things that you don't yet know are going to be development needs, we'll be there with you trying to support them. So Callum, again. So these are some ideas of things you might want to weave into your application, that if you have mentors that are close to you and can help you on very specific, especially technical points, obviously you need to find those, you need those to be in your proposal now, they will strengthen your application. But if in the longer term you have an interest, and if I can use that example about influencing policy, you could say that what you would do is come to the FLFDN and seek guidance from us and seek our help in finding a policy related mentor, and we could absolutely deliver on that. It might be that what you want to do is to explore later into your application connections with other FLFs. We, again, absolutely built into what we do. It could be that you want to explore additional funding to do other things. And again, the awareness of what we call our Plus Fund would enable you to do that. So if you're doing something that's about developing a particular technology, but if you wanted to wrap around that, the journey of how you brought that technology to market as an innovator, and you wanted there to be some learning associated with it, we'd be delighted to receive a Plus Fund application so that you could educate other innovators and support them. And of course, peer learning. As you go along, nobody knows the FLFs like the FLFs themselves. So it may well be that you know, as you're facing new challenges later in your fellowship, you might say that's a point at which you're going to look forward to discussing that with other FLFs who are at the same stage. Callum, again. I think just to plant this for you is that if you are successful, come and talk to us and tell us what it is that you need. And also, if you think there are things that would at this stage of writing, just keep thinking what would make a difference to your ambitions. And we can't help you with your application because many of us are involved in the recruitment and the scrutiny process. So as a rover, I cannot be involved on any individual applications, but what we can do is if you've got a query about the nature of the FLFDN, we can provide you with some additional information if that's useful. And again, I'm going to send some of that out preemptively. And I think there's one more, which is who we are and where we are. So if you've got any questions, please just drop us a line. You can see there, I'm based in the University of Edinburgh. I know that the glorious sunshine around me might make you think I'm somewhere else, but I'm definitely in Scotland today. There's also our generic email address, hello. And for those of you who use Twitter on social media, there's our network address and also my personal one. So really, I just want to wish you luck. I'm happy to answer questions about the processes, the SIFT and the interview process, if you have anything about that. And also, if there is anything that you think you'd like to refer to in an application and aren't sure if we do it, please do ask the question and I can tell you how you might be able to couch that. But for now, Callum, thank you, and look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So I think it's time for us to move on to the Q&A session. So I think we've had a few questions in the chat. Please do in the question and answer section. So please do continue to put any of your kind of thoughts, queries. There's no such thing as a stupid question at all. So ask away. And I think Jen, have you got any questions that you kind of wanted to field to us?
Yeah, so thanks very much, everybody. I'm Jen Postles from Innovate UK. I've been keeping an eye on the Q&A, and as Callum says, we've got 10 minutes remaining in the session, so please put anything in there that you do want us to cover. So firstly, we've had questions about the type of support that's available for researchers, innovators who don't necessarily have experience in preparing these sorts of proposals. So we've tried to reflect that in the level of detail that's provided in the guidance that's available online. So there's incredibly detailed guidance documents that I really recommend you take some time to work through and ensure that you're familiar with everything that's available there. Sarah's already mentioned that we'd recommend you engaging with your own network of mentors, colleagues, the wider network that's available to you in terms of providing that feedback, support and guidance as you're preparing your application. There are a few other resources that are available online that were prepared for previous rounds of FLF. So particularly for round 6, there are a couple of online recordings of webinars which focused on introducing the overall scheme and then preparing a high quality application. And both of those webinars have input from current fellows and people who are involved in the assessment. So I'm going to put those links in the chat and I'll make sure that they're circulated afterwards, and I'd recommend taking some time to go and have a look at those as well, just bearing in mind that some of the criteria have changed in terms of the eligibility for round 8 versus round 6, but the overall ambition of the scheme and the assessment criteria remain the same. So a lot of the advice that's there is still very relevant. We've got a few questions around eligibility. So I wondered, Cherish, if I can maybe pass some of these to you. I know some have been answered in text in the Q&A, but firstly, we've had a question, what is an IRO?
Yeah, so an IRO, sorry if that wasn't covered, it's quite, there's a lot of acronyms in there, isn't there? So it's an independent research organisation. So as Jen's directed kindly to the website before, there's a list of all eligible independent research organisations there for you to look through to. And if that's not listed on there, then we would call that a non-independent research organisation. So that should be able to provide you with the answer, hopefully. But as always, feel free to email into the team if you are unsure.
Thanks, Cherish. Secondly, we've had a question about eligibility of charitable trusts to act as a host organisation. So I can say that if you are a charitable organisation that's registered and incorporated, then you are eligible. There's no need to be featured on that list of UKRI eligible independent research organisations. But again, if you have any specific questions relating to your organisation's eligibility, then contact the team and we can advise. We've also had a question about international eligibility, which has come through and been answered, I think, on the Q&A section. But just to reiterate, that a non-UK organisation that has a UK office registered with Companies House could apply, but otherwise non-UK companies aren't eligible to apply for an FLF. And the majority of the work funded through the fellowship will need to take place in the UK, and the benefit being to the UK economy. I've got a question here, which I'll open out to Callum or to Cherish to answer about applying as a team or as an individual.
Yes, I'm happy to take this one. So the Future Leader Fellowship is an individual award. So you apply as an individual, but you've obviously got a team that you build around yourself. So the focus of the application is you as a leader, but obviously talk about the team, how your team around you is going to help you progress with your career. But it is an individual award first and foremost.
Thanks, Callum. I can see lots more questions coming through in the Q&A, so I'll just sort of throw these out as they're coming in. There's a question about applying as a small company. So we've got someone on the Q&A asking about applying as someone from a 5-person company and the chances of them being supported. So Callum, would you like to just talk to that one?
Yes, of course. So I can see that question actually has talked about kind of the level of number of awards that have gone to universities versus industrial partners, and the number of those that have been small versus large organisations. So the numbers that they've talked about are from one of the earliest rounds. That's round 3 of the Future Leader Fellowship. But since then, we've had the number of industry and kind of non-academic awards that have been successful increase each round, and we do see a kind of a much broader range of organisations that are represented. So we do have small SMEs where the fellow is the CEO of the SME, right through to the kind of big multinational organisations. So please don't be put off by kind of the size of your organisation. That shouldn't, as long as you've got a good application and you can really make a difference to your career through this fellowship, you're just as eligible as any other applicant from a different organisation size. And also, when you look at the kind of the data of the different awards, we have, just from the number of applications we have a much higher number from those in universities and academia. So if you actually look at the success rate when it comes to kind of the number of applications from academics versus non-academics, they're pretty much the same. So you've got just as much of a shot at getting the Future Leader Fellowship as anyone else. So please don't be put off by the size of your company. We'd love to see a huge range of organisations be awarded a fellowship.
Thanks, Callum. We have a question here about the need for a cover letter from an applicant who applied in the last round, but only to the level of the outline submission, and then was unable to complete the main application. Cherish, do you have any advice about whether a cover letter would be required there, or whether they'd just be seen as a new applicant?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, as the outline was previously not assessed, it was to judge numbers of applications and the remits these would sit in. We would advise this would not be deemed a resubmission. It wouldn't have been counted for. So I would say you can go ahead and submit as a brand new application to round 8. That will be fine.
Thanks, Cherish. And we've got some questions here about collaborations, one specifically about working with a university to develop the application and whether a university can be a partner and receive funding. So Callum, do you just want to talk there about the different routes that a fellow could apply for funding?
So so you can work with a university, so you can either as a kind of member of that university apply through the academic route, or you could apply as a non-academic in a separate organisation and have a university as a partner, a project partner, which is able to kind of receive the funding as to how the kind of however the collaboration works in that place. I think when it comes to engaging with universities, it might be a good question to pass on to Sara, because obviously she's based at University of Edinburgh and works within partnerships and that sort of thing. So Sara, kind of, have you got any tips on how best to work with the university to develop an FLF?
Yes, and again, obviously this is dependent on who you are, what you're doing. So there's lots and lots of caveats associated with this. But I would say, to start with, I think this is a huge missed opportunity for most universities. And I know that at my university, I certainly, in the days before I was very involved with the FLFDN, I would regularly support partners who had an affiliation with us. So I used to run mock interviews for applicants. I often would help them write their career development plans. They weren't my colleagues at the university, but they worked closely with us. So there was a partnership there. And I think that that's something that we can and should be doing. Now, I can't speak for every university, but what I can do is perhaps very briefly explain what the structures are. So my role previously was in research and development, and in research and development, I was in a position to help you write a career plan, a development plan, think about how you support your team. There are also colleagues in research offices or research and innovation services. They're called these sorts of things. And those are people that can help you understand the mechanics of the form. And now there will be things they're not familiar with because they don't generally look after industry partners, but they could certainly help you. So I would say that if there is an overlap, if you've got a natural partnership with a university, be cheeky, ask your academic colleague to say, who are you, who is it that you would go to in this case? And could you go and ask if they would give me some support? I would imagine this will be on a case-by-case basis, but if there are going to be joint studentships, then it's actually in our interest to support you to put in a strong application. If there are going to be joint aspects of the project, again, it's in our interest to support you. So I would say that if you have a university in mind, have a look and see if you can find out who that might be. If you don't know who it would be that you'd contact, just drop me a line and I can try and connect you with the right person in that organisation. What I can't do is help you work out which university it is, because it's got to be project led. That it's got to come from the nature of the work that you're doing. But if you know who the university is and you're really struggling to see who might be able to help you, drop me a line and I'll see if I can find somebody.
Thanks, Sarah. That's really helpful, and I think really reiterating there that in preparing these applications, really draw on the network that you have available to you, and make the most of those contacts and collaborations that you have in place to strengthen your application. I realise we're a couple of minutes over time. We do still have quite a few people on the line, so I'm going to carry on with the questions until about 10 past. But any questions that we don't get to, and even those that we have, we'll be providing the answers and circulating them along with all the materials afterwards. So if you do need to drop off and your question still hasn't been answered, we will be following up with the answers. So please don't worry. We've got questions about having two host organisations. I can see two similar questions about whether an FLF can have two host organisations, and then another whether an application can be on the interface of industry and academia with 50-50 partners collaboration. Callum, would you like to take that one?
Yes. You can only have one host organisation for a future user fellowship. So you would kind of have to make that decision or that call as to which one would be your host and therefore your kind of employer in this case. But then you can obviously have a very strong collaboration or partnership with another organisation as part of the project itself. So there can only be one singular host, but the project can be a collaboration between two organisations or a consortium of organisations, and that's up to you to kind of plan how that collaboration will work. But there can only be one kind of singular host organisation for the purpose of the fellowship, and the kind of the payments and the administration side of things. But by all means, have as much of a kind of collaborative work package as possible. We've got many fellowships that are based in one institution, but they work with teams from different organisations to work together on the same project. So it doesn't necessarily all have to be from the same host itself. So basically work out what works best for your project and your research, and build a fellowship around what will help you become the best leader and the research achieve its outputs and goals.
Thanks, Callum. There's a question that I can see from Cosmos, which says, what happens to someone unable to secure a host institution? and then there's a second part of that relating to length of time after a PhD. So in the case of not having a host institution, we can't support a fellowship that doesn't have a host institution. So you do need to have an eligible organisation in terms of either an academic organisation or any of the eligible non-academic organisations, which will be technically your host and employing you and receiving the funding, as Callum has described in his previous answer. In the second part of the answer of the question, sorry, there isn't a limit in terms of how long ago your PhD can be. We acknowledge and recognise that people have diverse and differing career paths. The key question is as to how far into establishing independence you are in your career. So this programme, these fellowships are intended to build and establish somebody in the independence in their career as a future leader. So if you qualify under those conditions, then the length of time that has passed since being awarded your PhD won't be taken into consideration.
Can I just jump in there quickly as well, just to mention that for non-academic awards, there is absolutely no need as well to have a PhD. So you can have equivalent experience in industry or charities or public sector, as whatever works as equivalents. But for non-academic awards, there's no need for a PhD. Fantastic if you've got one, and please do talk about it in your fellowship application. But just think about what sort of equivalent experience you've got when you're writing about the application.
Could I come in as well? Because I can talk to you about some of the FLFs we've got. We've got FLFs who are relatively late in their career, even though it's an early career award, because what they're demonstrating is a change of direction, a new strand to their career. So, it's very much about you to set up and explain why you are a future leader, and that can be at any point. So, I was sharing a platform a couple of weeks ago with a fellow in Cardiff, and he and I are very much of an age. And I think with all the will in the world, even with Zoom filters on, you could not describe me as early career. So it's very much up to you to convince the reviewers and the panels that this is about your trajectory, and that this is a point in which your independence and your new field is going to grow. So you define that, but can I just make sure that you do define it? Don't make any assumptions about what the person reading it might think. Tell them why you're at that early career stage. Tell them about why you are a future leader, because all that will be considered throughout the process.
Thanks very much, everybody. Right, I think we'll wrap up there. We've got a few more questions that have got specifics to them that we will answer in the response that we put out, and refer to the relevant guidance that's available. But I think we've provided hopefully our attendees with some useful information. I hope that we've convinced you of how excellent this opportunity is. It's a really exciting programme, and we really hope to see your applications coming in a few months' time, and we look forward to seeing what you're proposing in terms of your proposed fellowships. So thank you everybody for making the time to join us today. We will be circulating all the relevant information over the course of the next week or so. We will include in that all the information that you'll need in terms of following up and getting any further information that you haven't been able to get. So you'll have our contact details. You'll be able to get in touch with us at the fellows email address at UKRI. So just like to thank again all of our panel members for your presentations and for responding in this Q&A session. And I will close the meeting there and say thanks very much and have an excellent bank holiday weekend.